бере. Я не знаю, куди йти. Чую стрільбу по нас.
I'm gonna fucking shoot them.
For the second week straight, fighting has ramped up across most of the front lines. Russian forces have been especially active around Pokrovsk, Toretsk, and Lyman, as well as in the Kursk and Sumy regions. With talks coming up with Trump, Ukrainian sources claim that the Russians are trying to show they can still go on the offensive, even if the gains are minimal. Since Tuesday, Russian military sources have been reporting Ukrainian ground attacks in Belgorod Oblast, claiming that Ukrainian units are attempting to breach defenses along the Russian border in the Krasnoyarsk district, which borders the Kursk region. Ukrainian officials have been reluctant to comment on the Belgorod operation. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Counteracting Disinformation, initially dismissed reports as Russian fabrications. In quotations, "They made it up. They won. This often happens with Russians," he wrote on Telegram. However, President Zelensky later acknowledged the operation, framing it as a preemptive measure to prevent Russia from opening new fronts. He noted that Russia is concentrating forces along the Sumy border for a potential strike, while also building up troops near Kharkiv and in the Zaporizhia direction. On Tuesday 18th of March, Russia's defense ministry officially announced that Ukraine attempted to infiltrate troops into the western Belgorod Oblast at 5:50 a.m., targeting the Demidovka and Prilesye settlements. Moscow claimed that the operation was aimed at creating a negative backdrop for the US-Russia presidential phone call and discrediting Donald Trump's peace initiatives. Russian officials asserted that Ukrainian forces made 5 attempts to attack Belgorod on Tuesday, all of which were allegedly repelled. By Wednesday morning, Russian military telegram channels reported that all Ukrainian attacks on western Belgorod had been repelled. However, they acknowledged that the situation remained complex and warned that Ukraine was reinforcing its reserves and preparing for further strikes. In quotations, up to 200 Ukrainian soldiers and 29 military vehicles, including 5 tanks, 16 armored personnel carriers, and 3 engineering vehicles were involved, according to their statement. And as will be revealed below, most experts see little value in attacking Belgorod and consider it, at best, a diversionary maneuver. So today's video will be another Frontline update covering the Kursk, Sumy, and Pokrovsk fronts based on new reports. It will also cover some newer sectors like the Lyman sector, as well as this belated Belgorod offensive. As I persist in my battle against consistent ad revenue restrictions and limited reach in the algorithm, I ask that you continue to support my work with super thanks donations, and most of all, consider joining the exclusive channel membership community. This is where I actually post more content for my members than for the public. There is a trailer video in the end screen explaining everything you get when you join the membership, and stick around for bonus footage after this video. Links are also in the comments and the description sections. And let's get into it.
Раді вас бачити в ефірі.
Вітаємо.
Всіх вітаємо. На жаль, так сталося, що сьогодні під час евакуації нас накрили дуже дрони, FPV. Перед нами, на жаль, загинули 2 машини військових. Ми ледве вижили. Зараз у лісі. Машина наша знаходиться на трасі. Ми на Старлінку.
The Ukrainian armed forces continued their withdrawal from the Kursk region, while simultaneously taking up positions on heights along the border, partly in the Sumy region and partly to the south of Suja. In particular, the defense forces established positions on the banks of the Loknia River, thereby preventing the advance of Russian forces moving along the riverbed toward Basivka. At present, they are holding positions in Hoholivka, located on the shore of the reservoir on the Oleshna River, and are also occupying the high ground near the village of Guevo. Russia is not only attacking Ukrainian positions, but is also constantly attempting to break through in small groups along various sections of the Sumy region border. One such attempt near the village of Demidivka ended with the defense forces not only repelling the Russian troops, but also crossing the border in pursuit and securing positions on the outskirts of the village. However, the situation in this area continues to change dynamically. Now to the east, Ukrainian sources report that the area of Belgorod, where the alleged Ukrainian offensive is occurring, offers no strategic significant value. It consists mainly of empty fields and forests without major roads or settlements. The district center, Krasnaya Yaruga, lies 25 kilometers southeast, suggesting this may not have been the primary target. This was the opinion of defense analyst Yan Matviv. Mr. Matviv concludes that this was likely a diversionary maneuver, with Ukraine hoping the border was still poorly guarded, allowing them to break into the region quickly and force the Russian army to redirect significant forces from Kursk. BBC military analyst Ilya Abishev agrees, suggesting it could be an attempt at a diversionary strike or part of a broader strategy by the Ukrainian forces to try to stretch the strength of the Russian northern group. With Ukrainian forces withdrawing from Suja, their command now has additional reserves at its disposal, while Russian forces in Kursk remain focused on recapturing all Russian territory. Now, this Belgorod operation commenced on the morning of March 18th. Ukrainian forces conducted multiple waves of attacks towards the villages of Demidovka, Pilesi, and possibly Krafovka, located near the juncture between Ukraine's Sumy region and Russia's Belgorod and Kursk regions. The Ukrainian forces committed on the first day appeared to have been modest in size, likely totaling less than a battalion's worth of armored vehicles, along with support elements. The Ukrainians appeared to have advanced in small columns variously composed of infantry fighting vehicles, tanks and ATVs. Wissent 1 MC, IMR-2 and UR-77 obstacle-clearing vehicles carved the path through Dragon's Teeth obstacles and minefields near the border. Ukraine claimed to have conducted an airstrike on a Russian command post of a 3rd Motor Rifle Division unit near Demidovka the day the incursion began. The attacking forces were likely also supported by artillery and first-person view strike drone units. The Ukrainians appear to have continued attacking in the same areas in the days since the incursion began. Demidovka seems to be the main effort. Russian reports and video footage suggest these attacks have employed a mix of armored vehicles and small groups of infantry moving on foot or ATVs. Now, as to the composition of the Ukrainian units in this Belgorod incursion. Unlike Kiev's cross-border raids in 2023 and early 2024, which were conducted allegedly by pro-Ukraine Russian nationals subordinate to Ukrainian military intelligence, the Belgorod operation involves regular units. The Ukrainian vehicles participating in the Belgorod operation bear the same tactical symbol, a white triangle, that Ukraine used in Russia's Kursk Oblast. These vehicles include Bradley and Marder infantry fighting vehicles, suggesting Ukraine has committed some of its better forces to the operation. These appear to include elements of the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment, which fought in Kursk and operates Bradleys and Marders. In addition, Ukraine has deployed part of its 414th Separate Strike Unmanned Aerial Systems Brigade, one of its best drone units. Now, whether the Belgorod incursion is intended as a brief raid or a longer-term operation is unclear. Ollie Carroll of The Economist reported that Kiev had been planning the operation for 3 weeks and aims to establish a buffer zone, suggesting an intention for a sustained presence. President Volodymyr Zelensky similarly characterized the operation as a defensive measure to preempt a potential Russian offensive in Sumy Oblast. LWJ has observed no evidence that a Russian offensive across the Belgorod-Sumy border was imminent. Seizing the high ground near the Belgorod border could help protect against a Russian offensive in the Myropilya Uroidry area in Sumy Oblast and push Russian artillery and FPV drone crews back from the high-burn Myropilya road. It would also help guard the right bank of the Ukrainian forces still in Kursk Oblast, where Ukraine is holding a handful of border villages despite having largely withdrawn from the region. At the same time, Kiev may hope to alleviate pressure on Ukrainian defenders in Kursk and the Yanukivka area in Sumy Oblast by diverting Russian units to the Belgorod region. Also unlike in Ukraine's August 2024 Kursk offensive, when Ukrainian units quickly tore through the Russian lines, Russia seems to have been better prepared for this operation. The attacking Ukrainian forces are also smaller. In addition, anti-tank obstacles and minefields placed along the border appear to have done their job in slowing down and channeling the attacking forces. Moreover, given the proximity to Kursk, Russia may have been quickly able to transfer some units from Kursk to Belgorod. Many of the Russian units currently defending in Belgorod were previously known to be fighting in Kursk, though it is possible elements of some of those units were already deployed in Belgorod. So far, available evidence suggests Ukrainian forces have made only modest progress, perhaps taking some tree lines on the outskirts of Demidovka and Prilesi. Time will tell whether Ukraine will gain further ground or commit additional resources to sustain the operation. Doing so may present risks, given that Ukraine faces a manpower shortage and Washington is likely to provide significant additional aid to replace lost equipment and expended munitions. Now further up north in the Kupyansk sector, after the defense forces carried out a series of counterattacks on the Kupyansk front and retook the village of Fiholivka, part of the positions near Zapadny, as well as areas north of Kupyansk on the left bank of the Oskil River, Russian forces began searching for new weak spots in Ukrainian defenses. As a result, the Russians managed to cross the river even further north and entrench themselves between the villages of Kamyanka and Krasny Pershi, pushing about 2 kilometers deep and 3 kilometers wide into Ukrainian territory. If the Ukrainian armed forces are unable to quickly eliminate this new foothold, the Russians will attempt to expand it both northward toward the Russian border and the village of Topoli, which they had captured earlier, as well as southward in the direction of Fiholivka and Borichna. On the other hand, at this stage, the Ukrainians mostly see small sabotage and reconnaissance groups crossing to the right bank of the Oskil and building up in the area. However, Ukrainian sources believe that the Russians currently lack the capability to transfer armored vehicles or launch larger-scale offensives there. Now, although the Lyman direction has consistently remained of the most active, Russian forces have not been able for several months to break through from Terny to Yampolivka, where they have been stalled since January. They have also been unable to expand their foothold on the right bank of the Zerobets River near Ivanovka. As a result, they have shown some progress on the offensive by trying to establish new bridgeheads on the right bank of the Zerobets further upstream. In February, the Russians expanded their zone of control by several square kilometers near Makivka, and this week Russian forces attacked from the Zuravka ravine and captured Novolubivka, advancing over 2 kilometers. The next step will be to link the 3 bridgeheads and form a wide front stretching nearly 20 kilometers, allowing the Russians to advance towards Lyman, not only from the east, but also from the north. Now in Pokrovsk, despite a third of all battles on the front line taking place in this sector, Russian forces maintain their defensive position near the logistic routes, east and west of Pokrovsk. A 10 to 15 kilometer wide kill zone established by Russian drones has neutralized most of the Ukrainian counterattack efforts. Over the past week, the Russians' territorial gain has been the expansion of their control zone in the village of Zaporizhia, but is only by a mere 1 square kilometer. Heavy fighting continues in the grey zone between Andriivka and Constantinople, as well as within both settlements themselves. However, the Russians have seized Constantinople a couple of weeks ago. The Russians have concentrated significant efforts on dislodging the Ukrainian armed forces in these villages. On the Pokrovsk axis, some of the fiercest battles are taking place in the settlement near Shevchenko, which is almost entirely a grey zone, not controlled by either side as claimed by Ukrainian sources. Ukrainian forces are concentrated in the north, while Russian troops hold the south, from where they are attempting to push the Ukrainians back beyond the Solodenka River. On the opposite flank, the Ukrainian defense forces have entrenched themselves and are trying to prevent the Russians from advancing toward the section of the Pokrovsk-Konstantinivka highway near the village of Vozdvizenka.
Ты заебал! А, блядь!